Hey everybody, welcome to Life is Birdiful. I'm Anthony, and today we're going to be doing an episode of Legends of Beer. And with St. Patrick's Day approaching, I couldn't think of anybody else who would be more important to discuss than the Guinness founder himself, the man who made an empire, the visionary. Today we are going to discuss Arthur Guinness. The story of Arthur Guinness is a strange one. It tells the story of a man who is eccentric and passionate and motivated in everything he does by the seeking of the betterment of his people, the betterment of his countrymen, his family, motivated by God and just empowered in everything that he did. Despite building one of the most powerful beer industries in the entire world, we do have a lot of gaps in our knowledge of Arthur Guinness. We know that at his death, he claimed to be 78 years old, but there are no records of what his actual birth date are. The Guinness estate claimed that it's around 1725 that he was born, but there's no records indicating that, and there is a bit of a conspiracy theory where people think that the Guinness estate kind of just put out a number, put out a date, that way people would stop asking them about it. We don't even know where he was born, but the city of Selbridge in Ireland does maintain that claim to fame, although, once again, there is no documentation proving that. And if it wasn't for this one portrait that exists to today, we wouldn't even know what he looks like. So, along with everything else that this man did, he always carried with him a bit of mystery, a bit of intrigue. But luckily, some documentation did survive these hundreds of years, these centuries, and because of that, we are able to look back and remember all the amazing things that Arthur Guinness did. His father was a land steward for a very powerful archbishop, and one of his duties as land steward was to take care of the grounds and also brew the beer that would be drank by the fellow workers as well as the guests of the archbishop. Arthur's father would bring him along to the work days, that way he could learn the trade, learn the family business, and this is where Arthur presumably got his first experience in brewing. This would become one of the many steps down the path for Arthur to become one of the greatest legends of beer of all time. By the way, that archbishop was well renowned for the high quality dark beer that he served his guests on his estate. So a little bit of interesting foreshadowing going on there. It seems that brewing high quality dark beer runs in the family. When the archbishop passed away, he bequeathed 100 pounds to both Arthur and his father, which was an incredibly large sum of money. In that time period, it would have been roughly equivalent to about 4 years total wages for each of them. And with this inheritance, Arthur would use it to rise to power. He invested in a series of land management and building properties, and that was the foundation for his money-making empire, which he would eventually accumulate enough to open up his own brewery with his brother. However, that would take several decades to accumulate that wealth. During this time, he actually worked at an inn as a brewer once again. But when Arthur did make enough money to open up his own brewery, he wanted to focus exclusively on ale production. See, Arthur was an extremely religious man, and he felt that everything that he did should be in the betterment of his fellow countrymen, of his fellow humans, and under the grace of God. And because of his skills that he had honed over decades of brewing since he was a child, he knew that he would be able to use that in some way for God's grace. At this point in history, Ireland had been suffering a severe epidemic of overconsumption of alcohol, hard liquor, and especially gin. Because of the unsanitary and oftentimes questionable practices of liquor making, production, and distribution, it caused a lot of health problems for the people of Ireland. Many people were dying of alcohol poisoning. Many people were dying from just in general poisoning and dysentery from unsavory practices within that industry. But at the time, beer was kind of known as being the healthier alternative. So Arthur wanted to brew this beer for his people to offer them a path to salvation. However, very suddenly, only 3 years after opening this brewery with his brother, he left it 100% in the charge of his brother. There's not a whole lot of information on this time period, why he decided to leave, why he decided to abandon this brewery in hopes of starting a new brewery. But one can assume that Arthur had a vision, and he was an eccentric and bold and risk taker. He wanted to do it his way, and he wanted to do it in a grand scheme. And I can only assume that he had to set his sights for the heart of Ireland, Dublin. Once reaching Dublin, in 1759, Arthur signed a 9,000-year lease on an old, dilapidated brewery in the heart of the St. James Gate. And he made this contract of 9,000 years for a set annual rent of £45. The decision to purchase this brewery really shocked his friends, acquaintances, and fellow businessmen. The brewery was very small, very dilapidated, and poorly equipped. So much so that the actual pipes necessary for brewing beer at the production level that he wanted would have taken a complete, total renovation of its plumbing, which was a challenge that Arthur took upon himself and his crew to complete. This decision led to one of the most beautiful examples of Arthur's eccentricity. The water technically belonged to the city of Dublin, and of course you would pay a fee annually for your water consumption. And the city of Dublin really did not appreciate Arthur expanding his consumption of this water. They felt that it belonged to them, and that by him taking it without their express consent was equivalent to theft. They wrote to him their displeasure and told him that if he did not cease and desist, that they would consider it theft and that they would be forced to stop him. In which he returned a response claiming that any attempts to halt him would be met with force by arms. So when the sheriff of Dublin showed up to the St. James Gate Brewery to stop him, Arthur picked up a pickaxe and claimed that any attempt to stop his goal, his vision, would be met with physical force. This led to a long, complicated legal lawsuit, which eventually resulted in Arthur being able to get unlimited access to water, as well as the renovation of his brewery for a total lump sum of 12 additional pounds annually, which was an incredibly critical and calculated part of Arthur's plan. There were many breweries within the Dublin area because of the high quality water and the abundance of it. The water was incredibly soft and was perfect for brewing delicious Irish ales. Because the lack of concern for rent and water due to these arrangements he made within the city, he set himself up for almost unlimited potential and growth. And despite this fierce competition, Arthur still had more plans, more tricks up his sleeve to set himself apart from the others. Arthur was going to take it upon himself to brew, and not only brew, but be the best at brewing dark beer. The style of porter had originated in London, but had rapidly risen up the coast and had become incredibly popular within Ireland. This style of beer had been brewed within Ireland since the 1760s. But Arthur was a highly driven and highly motivated man, and he knew that he would be able to perfect its recipe. So over the next several decades, Arthur went to work. He carefully crafted each aspect of the beer, adjusted it to its absolute peak perfection, and it caught on like wildfire. Between 1779 and 1799, Guinness experienced almost unprecedented growth. They became the largest brewery within Ireland and one of the largest producers of porter in the entire world. And after all the success, Arthur decided that Guinness was going to brew porter exclusively, which was a bit of a shame in my personal opinion. The man truly did have talent to be an exceptional brewer. If you remember back in 2014, Guinness released one of Arthur's original recipes for his Irish Amber Ale, the 1759. And I absolutely loved it. It was incredibly delicious. And it was so interesting that such an incredibly well-made, fine-tuned beer was developed almost 200 years ago. But alas, it was this focus on porter and dark beer that would rocket Guinness to be one of the mega monoliths that it is today. And it was because of this drive, this seeking of perfection, that Guinness would develop one of the most popular drink stouts of all time. This massive success rocketed Arthur to the forefront of the brewing world in Ireland. He was appointed as the head of several brewers' guilds, which he maintained until the day of his death. Arthur eventually handed over his business and lived the remainder of his life in Dublin until his death in 1803. But his legacy lived on and will continue to live on. During his life, he built one of the world's most powerful beer industries, but that was only one part of who he was. He developed numerous charities that helped millions and continue to help people to this day. Additionally, he fought for the betterment of his people and is credited as being one of the people who helped abolish pistol dueling within the city of Dublin. And again, he's seen as a deeply devoted and deeply religious man and is credited as being the founder of Irish Sunday school and Bible study for young men. It's an incredibly complex and incredibly detailed legacy he left behind. Arthur was an incredibly eccentric and incredibly bold man from cradle to grave, and without a doubt improved the lives of his family, his countrymen, his religion, and of course, beer. And it's for these reasons that Arthur Guinness will forever go down as one of the greatest legends in beer. Fortune truly does favor the bold. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed this story of one of beer's most interesting characters and interesting people. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe. Remember that every bottle has a story and that life is beautiful. Cheers.